Our next talk is Heidi Pendergast from the Healing Advocacy Fund, and she is going to talk to us a little bit more about community regulations. So we can think about, we have the government regulations and the rules, and then we have this incredible community that we are all a part of, and we get to regulate ourselves as well. It's important to remember that. And so we are adding on, and this next layer is going to be Heidi talking about the work at the Healing Advocacy Fund, and so please welcome me in inviting her up to the stage.
Hi there, everyone. I'm Heidi Pendergast. I use she, her pronouns. I am with the Healing Advocacy Fund. I am the Oregon director. And before we jump into this, I actually just wanted to get a sense of who is in the audience today. So if you're traveling from out of state, could you give me, I'm going to call it a badge jiggle. Who's here from out of state? Excellent. Welcome, welcome. And who considers themselves part of the Oregon psilocybin program? Define it however you like. Another badge jiggle? Yeah, the rock stars in the room. And who's just curious and are like, I want to know what's going on in Oregon? Me too, I'm still curious about it. Well, excellent. Oop, I hit the wrong button, folks. Sorry about that. I'm going to try to... There we go. So this is an article that came out a few weeks ago in the New York Times. It's pretty incredible to be in Oregon at this moment in time, and we helped shepherd this article through for months, and we're really, really proud that Oregon is on the national forefront of this program. The Healing Advocacy Fund is a 501c3 nonprofit organization dedicated to expanding and protecting psychedelic healing for all. We really see the state-regulated model as a way of being able to pave a broader path to access to psychedelic healing. And although we started actually just as a Oregon kind of nonprofit when Measure 109 first passed, we have been recently joined by the state of Colorado on Psychedelic Island, as we like to call it. So welcome, Colorado, if you're from here. We're very happy that we're not alone anymore. And so Angie went through a lot of what the Oregon program is, and I'm going to bring up Colorado right now because this is a conversation that's happening between states now, and we have a lot to learn from Colorado, and they're also learning a lot from us. So in the Colorado measure, in addition to the service center model that we have here in Oregon, they also allow psychedelic use within licensed healthcare facilities, at home for palliative and end-of-life care, which is pretty exciting. Also, they do allow dual licensure. So if you hold a therapist license, you can actually wear that hat within a psilocybin therapy session there in Colorado. They also have some provisions for personal use, which we don't have here, but this is really going to be a conversation between the states, and as they develop their rules, they're looking at Oregon, they're shining some lights onto areas that we can improve, and so we're trying to learn from their learning of us. So it's kind of matrixy there, but. So today, what I'd like to do is give a brief program snapshot of kind of where we've been and where we're headed. And as I was doing these slides, I broke it down to challenges and opportunities. They're the exact same thing. They're two different sides of the same coin. So it should just be one line item, but we'll do both of them. So we've come a long way. Measure 109 passed in November of 2020, so just about 3 years ago now, with 56% of the vote. And Angie mentioned the long 2-year rulemaking process that a lot of people in this room were a part of. In January of this year, the OHA opened licensing for the first time, and just 5 months later, the first service center opened its doors and served the first psilocybin session to the first client in a state-regulated model ever. Absolutely incredible. Yes. I still can't believe we get to do this work. I'm amazed. So just, 7 months after that, In November of this year, and this number's from earlier, but there's been over 500 clients served. And that's between all the service centers across the state. That number is going to be dramatically increasing next year. I anticipate by next year it'll at least be 3 to 4 times more than what we've seen now, probably even higher than that. And just to give you a sense, that's significantly more than all of the clinical trials combined. And we'll be passing that threshold relatively soon. We also worked to pass Senate Bill 303 to help collect information on the rollout of this groundbreaking program, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. Angie covered a little bit about this, but it's important to note that the Oregon model tried to bake safety into as much of the program as possible. So there's a safety assessment that happens where the client and facilitator talking, assess physical, socio-emotional, mental health considerations, and try to figure out, are they a good fit for one another? Then there's the preparation session, and this is really the goal setting for the individual. Then there's the administration session. And during the administration session, the client is with the facilitator the entire time until the effects of psilocybin have left. After that, within this model, there's an optional integration program, but a lot of facilitators and service centers try to make this required because we know integration is so incredibly powerful, and that oftentimes the psilocybin session is just the beginning of a healing process that takes a lot more time afterwards. So let's dive under the hood a little bit. You can see with the dots on this, the state of Oregon, that's the I-5 corridor there. And that's where most of the service centers are opening. It's within the dense population areas. As Angie mentioned, there was the ability to be able to opt out, and so we're seeing more of the densely populated areas as being the ones who opted in to this model. I don't have updated numbers on my hand. I'm sorry. Angie has a little bit of intel on when those numbers are going to drop. They dropped late last night after I already submitted my slides. So these are outdated as of right now. But a few important things to note. So the areas that you're seeing are, the Portland area, Albany, Eugene, and Ashland. Also, we have on the east side, Hood River and Bend, Oregon representing, and we'll see those numbers continue to rise. And the facilitator numbers, and especially the service center numbers, those are kind of linked as more facilitators, as more service centers get licensed, that number of facilitators is going to drastically go up. Challenges, we're not without them. One of the biggest ones hampering us right now is federal illegality. This is impacting our ability and the ability of business owners here to be able to open bank accounts. There's been some progress on that, but also impacting professional liability insurance. Right now, there is no coverage for folks unless you hold another type of medical license. This is a huge, huge problem, and if you're in this room and working on insurance, please, let's help this community here that's really paving the way. Also, a lot of facilitators are just getting off the ground, and it takes a long time to build an ecosystem. And so the professional consultation groups that we see in other similar fields are just starting to form. Part of this is just an issue of time. It takes time for people to connect and time for organizations to spring up as needed in response to things on the ground. The OHA rules that Angie talked about they are the floor to the program. And we've seen, and we'll talk a little bit about how the community is setting kind of higher standards around this work. And then we'll figure out, okay, should those actually be codified? Is that something we want to fight for in the rules opening next year or advocate for? And then the last thing on the ecosystem is there's a very limited referral network right now. And that's on both sides of kind of the intake and the outtake process. Your average family doctor may not know a lot about about psychedelics. And so we have a limited network of folks who you can go to say, hey, I'm not sure if this is right for me. And so we're trying to put together resources. There's other national groups working on this as well, but it's a challenge right now. Also, on the flip side of it, after someone's done a session, if someone's struggling, it's hard to be able to find the referral network. And we need to figure out how we systematize this to support people post-journey as well, too. One of the major challenges right now in Oregon is we have a lack of data. So within Measure 109, within the rules, there is nothing that says, hey, we got to report out on how many clients have been served. We know an estimate number because of the amazing work of service centers here self-reporting their numbers, but this is a really big challenge right now. So we can't answer the question, who is using these services, what's the impact, and what's the prevalence of adverse events? And that is why in June of this past year, we helped pass Senate Bill 303 that will help collect at least part of this information on the access of the program. Also, everyone knows that the cost of services it's high. There's no getting around that right now. I do want to caveat that I think that a lot of the reason behind the cost is there's an immense amount of time that's put in by facilitators. At a minimum, it's about 8 hours for a client who's taking a full dose. It's 6 hours minimum stay, and then if you factor in a minimum of 1 hour on either side, 8 hours of time. We've heard of folks where that number goes up to 16 or 18 hours. So there's high variability right now, but we need to figure this out to be able to make it more accessible for folks. All eyes are on Oregon. This is both a challenge and a huge opportunity, and we take it very seriously to shepherd this process forward. So with that, let's talk about opportunities, because there's a lot. I see this in two main buckets. We have to make this wider and more accessible to folks. That's why the voters of this state voted for this. This cannot be a program that is just for the wealthy. It has to access the people who need it most. Secondly, we have to do this in a responsible way. We don't want that door closing. All eyes are on us right now. We need to be able to widen the door. The reason Colorado was able to come on board is because we were first, and we had a smaller, narrower program, and they were able to widen it more. So how do we do that? The bedrock of this entire program is safety. It has to be. And by safety, I don't mean without risk. There is not a substance on this planet that you can take that is without risk at all. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about putting in safety guardrails, additional mechanisms, so that a wider range of folks who have never entered into the psychedelic space can actually get healing from these modalities. Like I said, the rules are a baseline, and we're also learning a lot as this program rolls out on what rules need to be strengthened. We have a safety committee that we engage of local and national experts who came to us and said, hey, the dosing's a little all over the place right now. And one thing we noticed is psilocybin isn't on the label. It's not required. It's being tested. But that's kind of throwing off the potency of these products. And so we put together a letter and it's still a public sign-on letter, and we hope to see that the rules will reflect and require that to be changed. But again, this is an iterative process because we're learning so much in warp speed right now that we're really trying to iterate and come together and learn the information that we can. On the safety side, on the data side, because SB 303 doesn't go into effect until January of 2025, we have a huge opportunity to come together right now and figure out some basic reporting so that when an adverse event happens, they are already happening, they will continue to happen, that we can contextualize and say it is a small portion. That is one of the biggest things that will help protect this program and help us learn to support people who are having adverse events. On the safety net side, we also have to figure out there are tremendous harm reduction specialists and providers in this state who are kind of far-flung everywhere, but we need to figure out a way to be able to systematize a safety net for folks who are having challenging events that we can point to, whether it's a hotline or something like that. It doesn't exist right now, but it's certainly, there's conversations with people in this room about leading that work, and that's something we look forward to. Next up is education. So we do a lot of education with the public and the media around both the benefits of psilocybin, but also setting realistic expectations. This is not a panacea. This isn't a one-time thing. For most people, they have to do multiple different sessions and have long integration afterwards. And so how do we actually balance a conversation so it's not all sunshine and rainbows and you just do this and it'll be better forever? And that helps people going into it so they don't think something's wrong if not everything is fixed afterwards. We are working on a client education guide, again, with members from our safety committee to help set expectations and realistic expectations, talk about adverse events, list out medical and mental health considerations that people should think about before doing this, and start to pull together some of the providers that people can speak with ahead of time. Also on the education front, there's education in connecting community here. Because we are learning so much, we need to be able to bring the community together, and this is happening through webinars, training programs, lots of different space, but this has to happen in real time. I can't stress how many known unknowns and unknown knowns and all that sort of stuff is out there right now. This also isn't for everyone, and that's okay. Psychedelics are not for everyone, and we shouldn't pretend like they are. They have tremendous benefits to a tremendous amount of people, but I think that this point is really, really important to hold. I'm actually going to jump to this slide instead. So industry's safety practices. This is part of what the service centers and facilitators in this room are already doing to lift up the floor from the OHA baselines, which I know Angie said the rules are 100 pages. If you put them into 12-point font, it comes out to 160. It's immense, it's incredible. It's really no small feat to do what they've done and pull those rules together. But, you know, they're baseline, and what we're seeing within the industry now is that folks are actually putting additional safety practices in place. So doing fit matching and referrals, working with green light clients to begin with. And so these are clients who don't have as much of the medical or mental health history or complications, kind of to get your sea legs under you while you're figuring out how to run this brand new business in a brand new industry. Working with clients that might have a little bit less adverse events. Also, we're starting to see service centers and facilitators require multiple preparation sessions, whether it's 2 or 3 on the front end, 2 or 3 on the back end as part of this. Which I think is very exciting. And then, some folks are working, have direct relationships with medical mental health consultation practices for everyone that's coming through their service center, or same thing with facilitators. Service centers are also, some of them are looking at and have put in place dosage limits. Just seeing that the kind of therapeutic dose, it may not be 50 milligrams for everyone. Sometimes it's 25. That's all right. You don't need to always be at the highest level of blood pressure medication to get the best effects from it. And so we're seeing that as well with psilocybin. And also possibly increasing some of the minimum stays because of the variability and potency and dosage right now. On the after administration session side, people are doing a lot to make sure that people are connected to care. If they have a therapist that they're working with on the outside, how to transfer some of the information over to them, of course, with client consent. And also some places have hired in-house facilitator coaches or staff to really work to build those peer consultation groups. Eventually, I think it would be great if, once we get a sense of which ones of these aren't just best practices, but should be gold standards, that we really try to lift it up and promote it to the community at large. Access. So I view this in 3 different ways. So there's the short-term access that we'll talk a little bit about, long-term, and then also program expansion. So in the short term, a lot of service centers and facilitators are already have things put in place. So some people have pay-it-forward programs where after a client goes through a session, they're like, I want to help other people get access to that. I mean, that's part of, I imagine a lot of us have that experience in the room here. And so they have funds where clients can help pay for other clients. Some people setting aside a percentage of all of their services to dedicate to specific groups. There's an idea of impact pilots, which we'll talk a little bit more about later, and then group sessions. Group sessions are one of the biggest ways right now that we can curb some of the cost, and we're also looking to see, are there ways that we can loosen the restrictions around group sessions without impacting safety at all, to be able to continue to curb some of that. And there's also incredible healing that can be done in groups. People are looking at psilocybin access funds and also scholarships. There's even a thrift store in Portland that's been set up where the funds are going to psilocybin services. I haven't checked it out, but if you want to do a field trip with me, let me know, we'll head over. There we go. Long term, these are all things that we desperately want to see. Employer reimbursement, state Medicaid dollars, social impact bonds going to this, and of course, eventually insurance coverage. But what do we need to be able to show in order to get these things? And it's two main things: safety, which we've talked about, and efficacy, impact. So right now, psilocybin services are happening, but we don't have a lot of data on this. SB 303 will help on the use side, but on the impact side, we still don't have the information here. But that state and private investment will be able to fund more services if we're able to prove the efficacy through use and impact data. Oh, let's see if this will come up. Oh. All right, it's missing some of the information on the slides, but that's all right. So impact pilots. This is a photo from Bendable. That's a nonprofit working to help connect people with services, and they work directly with the service center and the Heroic Hearts Project. And we are exploring the idea of impact pilots. And so what this is how can we connect stakeholder communities with researchers and philanthropic groups to do studies with folks who opt into these studies to show the short, medium, and long-term impact of psilocybin services on them. And this accomplishes three things. Number one, it gets access to communities who most need it, and it gets access now. Number two, it allows us to do real-world research on this actually rolling out. This isn't a clinical trial model. This is happening like with real people, just like, I mean, you can throw a stone to where it's happening now. It's amazing. And the last thing is it gives us leverage to be able to access more funding to get institutional investment into this program. Sorry, I don't know what happened to my words on these slides. So program expansion. The rules reopen in 2024, and that's a really big opportunity for us to look at areas like palliative care. Is there more that we can be doing for end-of-life clients that we can loosen up in the rules? I know Emma and Angie were just talking about, the licensure. What else can we be doing around dually licensed folks? Again, Colorado is starting to develop their framework. What can we learn? Are there things that we can bring in? And as the advocates in this space, really, I invite you, we're going to be bringing together panels of folks to hear from you about your recommendations on this, about what makes sense and what will make this program stronger and safer and more impactful for people. As I get close to wrapping up, I want to stress that what we are doing here is, being watched from everyone. But I also think one of the value of having a nonprofit that works in multiple states is we are very, very connected. And our Colorado director, Tasha, is here. She'll be on a panel. You should listen to her. And also the Heroic Hearts and Bendable team will be on a panel. You should listen to them. Just everyone. But we stay in close contact to really learn. As I said, they're actually kind of going through our rules with a fine-tooth comb, which I'm like, all right, guys. But they're giving us really strong recommendations, and this should be an iterative process that we use to strengthen the program, especially as more and more states come on board, because Massachusetts, New Jersey, and other states are going to be looking to us, because there will be more that are coming on board, joining us on Psychedelic Island. All right, you might remember this picture from our first slide. This is Alex, he's a Marine Corps veteran, and I'll give you just a moment to read. So Alex was featured in the New York Times piece, and one of the biggest opportunities that we have right now is sharing out the stories of the folks who are actually experiencing healing through this. And so with the last few minutes that I have, if we could cue a video that we'd like to share of a pretty powerful story from a client that was one of the first clients to receive services here in Oregon.
I was a child in a very abusive household, so all my memories are trauma. I don't think there's ever a time that I have wanted to be on this planet. Suicide has been with me from the very beginning, and I never really acted on it until the second grade. The best therapist I've ever had. He taught me that you lose who you are when you are a child and you go through this kind of abuse. You lose who you are. I would love to see that I could make those connections again and rediscover that little girl and who she might have been. I have so much love to give. I would love to do for another human being what wasn't done for me.
Venable started out of a desire to try to support the nascent psilocybin industry popping up in Oregon.
What was being left out that no one was picking up was how to make this accessible.
We're having a conversation about how unfortunate it was that psilocybin was going to quickly become inaccessible. The average community members in Oregon are not going to be able to afford the price of a session, due to health insurance doesn't cover it. It is costly because of the amount of time and effort that goes into it. So we could start a nonprofit that could support scholarships and help people access psilocybin in an affordable way.
Picking out intentions is really hard when you've got a lifetime of garbage to sort through, for lack of a better term. Chosen the word freedom. Freedom from the pain, but I've chosen, sorry, it's been hard. A second term is connectivity, because I have lived a life of isolation. Those are my intentions, to put connectivity and have freedom from all the chains that hold me back. I'd love to see us all flow. My daughter and myself just find a link.
One of the powers in the medicine is that it presents those things to us that we don't want to see, and then it is up to us to turn towards them. To move towards something that's really tender and powerful and overwhelming intentionally goes against our safety and well-being. And that's why having a guide can be helpful, to say that that is okay, that this is the work. Sometimes coming in contact with those challenging things and moving through them is where the healing happens. And that means coming in contact with some intense thoughts, feelings, emotions, memories. When you're in that space, the wisdom is to turn towards it. Anytime that we resist what is happening, kind of the outcome is suffering. So just because it's challenging doesn't mean it's bad. During your experience, there was a lot of judgment you had about yourself and whether you were doing it right.
Yesterday, I was just so locked in darkness, and I kept, holding those intentions about breaking the bonds and, having freedom. I wanted you to know what a difference you made on that journey and what a difference you're making now, because I knew you were there. I had this invisible thread, some silver thread to you that was there.
The process of uncovering and resolution and integration is not predictable. It's a beginning of a new process, and that unfolds on its own direction and timing.
I'm going to be unpacking a lot of things here, but I think I feel not hopeless going forward. For the first time, I see a spark of brightness, and I'm really glad for that. Life has its lessons, and it has its way of teaching, and I'm just trying to be open to that. Would I have wanted the brass ring? Of course. But no, I'm not giving up, and without this experience, I wouldn't be where I am to move onward and hopefully forward and upward and see those intentions realized, because I have a sense they will be.
And thank you. And through stories like that of Casey's, we can help normalize and expand access to psilocybin. I look forward to doing that with all of you, and it's been my honor to do this work so far. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Heidi.
Yeah.
Just want to invite everyone to take a breath. Thanks for sharing that powerful story. Okay, your psychedelic flight attendant is back, and I have a few little announcements before we go on to Q&A. I want to remind everyone that the QR codes for submitting questions and then voting for questions are on pieces of paper at the back tables. They might be on screen in a moment, maybe not. There you go, okay, yeah, take your phone out, scan that. And this is the code we'll be using throughout the whole weekend. My other announcement is there's still seats. If y'all sit on the floor or standing want to sit down, feel free to do that. If you want to practice your yoga on the floor, that's also fine. Okay, so there's a lot of curiosity about data collection.
Understandably.
It's a hot topic.
Uh-huh.
Talk to us a little bit more about how the data is collected, how it's stored, who has access to it, and about client ability to opt in or out of that process.
Absolutely. So service centers actually store all of that information, and there's tons of regulations and the rules that talk about the protections that are needed in there. So facilitators will work to fill out all of the paperwork, but that's actually stored and housed at the service center level. And that includes all of the details that are in all of the forms that are there. And yep, there's tons of pages on rules. So what I can say is, because I assume that this is also in part to SB 303 and what data that is. So SB 303 is really to collect aggregate level data. So what we're talking about is not Heidi Pendergast went to go seek psilocybin services and her client file is being sent over. What it is it's part of it is demographic data, so age, race, where I came from, my zip code, and then part of this is reports from service centers on these are the total number of clients that I saw, these are how many adverse events and which different types they are. But those are aggregate numbers. So those are totally separate than the individual level client data. It would kind of be equivalent to, within the state of Oregon, emergency rooms need to report how many clients come through the door. Right now, there's none of that reporting whatsoever, again, at the aggregate level. And right now, there's, within SB 303, clients can opt out of even having their demographic level data shared. So they can say like, no, I don't want my age, my race, where I come from to be included in that information, and they can opt out. And the OHA is actually in the process of developing exactly what that looks like in the forms. There was the technical fix rulemaking period that just happened, so we're waiting to see what the final rules are. So those are still TBD right now until I think the end of the year. And there's still a remaining question, and from us, we believe that the intent of SB 303, at the very least, was to collect the baseline aggregate total data of just service averages and adverse events, because we believe it's foundational to the safety of the program, but we'll have to wait until the OHA rules come out to be able to see where they land on that.
Okay, that's helpful. Can you define adverse event for me? What does that mean?
So this has been a hot topic if anyone has been a part of the rules and regulations, and there's multiple different definitions in the rules. So I can't actually do it yet because it's not even settled within the OHA rules. There are different thresholds that we're looking at. Some of it is, if you have to call emergency services, or if a client needs to follow up with a medical or mental health provider immediately following it. But there's multiple different definitions in the rules. So again, hopefully we'll have clarity when we get the final ones at the end of December.
Okay. Is that definition something that service centers have any control over when they're giving the data? Like service centers get to decide a threshold for what an adverse event might be to them, or is that definition going to be fixed once the rules come out?
There'll be a somewhat fixed definition,
Okay.
but in any case, there's oftentimes room for judgment within there.
Yeah.
But some of them, like if you have to call emergency services. That's something that wouldn't be, at your discretion. It's like you either do or you don't, but there might be areas of different thresholds aside from that.
Okay, helpful. Totally different avenue now. So some curiosity about Oregon and Colorado, and then future states coming online too.
Yep.
Is there going to be reciprocity with licensing? Like if you're licensed here, can
We're
you
gonna
move to
try
Colorado?
to push for it. Where's Angie? Where'd she go? She left. No. I think that's a huge question, and I think we're hoping for it. I'd say we're like looking to advocate for that, and we need to work with licensing boards because this program is taking different shapes. But I think that it is a great idea, and it's something that we will advocate for.
Could the community help with that in any way?
Yes. I don't know how yet, but yes.
Okay.
We got a bunch of other things in the interim right now, but yes.
Yeah.
And Colorado's in the process, and a lot of people in this room have actually talked to the Colorado team and the regulatory body out there to provide information. And so there is a dialogue happening. If you want to be part of that, feel free to reach out to me. We'd absolutely love that because that's how we're going to get to the place of being able to have reciprocity.
Yeah. Yeah, and what I hear you saying too is that the community voice does have power in how these rules are being made, and that working with y'all, working with Angie, working with the many different community organizations that are present can help get that voice heard. So if folks in the room really care about that reciprocity, there's space to get involved and actually influence how those rules could be made as they roll out. Am I getting that right?
Absolutely, and the people who are actually doing the work on the ground are the experts, and we need to collect the collective knowledge that you have and figure out what recommendations we make, not just in the rules, but for the program overall nationally as it rolls out.
Yeah, beautiful. So talk to me a little bit about demand.
Yeah.
Where are we at with it? How's it being measured? How are people expressing it? Like the information that you have, how do you gather that and help us understand what that means?
Sure. So I am not an economist. I know that there are some economists who are interested in measuring this, and that is very exciting. I do believe that there is way more demand than service centers right now. There are a lot of restrictions, though, on service centers on being able to advertise. So the question is how do you find psilocybin services, which is kind of hard right now. And I live on the OHA website. Not necessarily the most user-friendly, snazzy website you've ever been on. Super informative, incredibly helpful, but it's not their job to to try to figure out how to connect folks with psilocybin services. I think that is a huge, huge need. There are certain service centers that have incredibly long wait lists. There are certain service centers that do not. A lot of it's through earned media right now of how service centers are able to get the word out because they're not able to do advertising. But we do know that people are flying in from literally all across the United States. Some service centers say, as high as 80 or 90% of the clients they're seeing come from out of state. Some are hyper local focused, but a lot are seeing a mix of 50% or so coming from out of state. So the demand is there. It's how do we connect those folks? If anyone's working on a directory for all service centers and facilitators, it'd be amazing. But again, it's like building an ecosystem takes time.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to name, just for everyone who's on the app, there's a question about Casey that I see on here has been really highly upvoted, and we're going to have the people from Bendable on stage later today, so I'm going to save this question for when they are on stage, and they're going to be able to answer it in a more directed way because Heidi is not a part of that team. Yeah. So just let everyone know that question will be answered later today. So Heidi, wondering about liability insurance. Mm-hmm. Do facilitators need it? Do service centers need it? How do we get it? What does it look like?
Yes, so I'm not a lawyer, but I would recommend professional liability insurance. And there's, the amount of times I've heard like, this insurance agency is going to have it in like just a month. That's been for 6 or 7 months. And again, this is in part because you need a lot of data and information, especially for insurance, and we don't have that yet. And so people are trying to figure out how to pitch this to underwriters when there's not information on data of the safety of the program, because that's what insurance relies on. So that's one of the challenges right now. But I still am hopeful that it will come on, but I can't make any promises about it, unfortunately.
Okay, so one of those things we're going to have to wait and see.
Yes.
Okay. Let me see here. So in terms of safety practices, do we have any best practices documents? Do we have practice guidelines yet? Or is this kind of all in the nascent stage, and as long as people are following the rules, they can kind of do what they want?
I'd say best practices are in the process of being developed. Like, people are trying things out and they're starting to see what works. And we do, for any service center that's open, we convene a monthly call so service centers can share their practices. I try to add people as they come out, but not all the information is public unless you list on the directory. Feel free to reach out to me. Would love to put you on that. But we are certainly interested in kind of compiling that, lifting it up, and having service centers learn from each other on that. But it's even too early. Although I would say service centers are starting to establish their own best practices as they kind of see what's happening on the ground.
Okay, so this is where that community regulation organizing effort really comes into play.
Yes.
That we have the OHA regulations are a certain baseline for how we have to do things, and that as a community we can decide together what are the norms that we want in terms of safety protocols and holding each other accountable to those.
Exactly.
Yeah, beautiful. Okay. So this is a question that has a lot of votes. I don't know if you're going to know the answer to this. I might be able to help with it too, but let's just try our best. Who screens clients for contraindicated pre-existing conditions? So people who have experience with schizophrenia, bipolar, what does that look like?
Sure. So, so within the OHA rules, it's a recommendation, although again, some service centers require the facilitators that they work with to actually do that medical and mental health screening. Some service centers have a dedicated person that they work with. Some people do go back and talk to their, their individual provider. We're in the process of trying to put together a list of people who can do this sort of work as part of our client education guide, which hopefully will be out by the end of this year. But if you have anything to add on that point as well too, it's a loose thing right now.
Yeah, I would say that I've seen different models at different service centers. Some people have. Oh, there we go. Okay.
Yeah.
Some people have a medical person on staff that does all the screening. Some of it is done in prep sessions. There's different structures in different service centers. And so if you're interested about that, I would recommend taking a look at the protocols that are in the different spaces. And this is, again, one of those community regulations that we could work together to create a threshold around of expectations for safety and screening.
Yeah, and again, there's also just not a ton of folks who do that right now, which is a challenge. And so how do we help direct people to the people who do it and have capacity to be able to do it? I think it's a big question.
Yeah. Last question for you, Heidi. If you could encourage anything from this community in terms of getting involved, what would it be?
Oh, I love this question. We're the ones we've been waiting for. If you're like, I've got a great idea that the Healing Advocacy Fund should do, come with me, talk about it, and we'll try to do it together. But really, if you're thinking about starting an organization, taking anything on in this space, look in the mirror, because it might just be you who's the one who's paving the way for that. And I'm certainly here to be a partner in that work, but we need more and more people to build this ecosystem. So that's what I would say.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you so much, Heidi.
Thank you all very much.
Wonderful.
Appreciate it.